The studio went silent when Adriana Voss placed her coffee cup on the table. Not loudly, not dramatically. She simply stopped Duchess Marina Vale in the middle of a sentence and asked one question. If everyone who disagrees with you is cruel, who is allowed to tell you when you're wrong? Marina stared at her. 5 women sat around the curved Dayline table. 3 cameras remained trained on them. Nearly 200 audience members waited for someone to laugh. Nobody did. 30 seconds earlier, Marina had been smiling. 5 minutes earlier, she had been discussing compassion. 20 minutes earlier, she had walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. Now she was looking across the table at one of the most respected actresses and humanitarian campaigners in the world, as though Adriana had broken some invisible agreement. Marina's lips parted, then closed. The silence lasted long enough for the host to shift in her chair. Adriana did not look angry. That was what made the moment impossible to dismiss. She looked almost sad. "You asked what I thought," Adriana said. Marina's expression tightened. "I did. I'm answering." The audience remained still. Marina glanced toward the host, then back toward Adriana. "Well, I think that framing is a little unfair." Adriana nodded. Maybe. No defensiveness. No victory. Just maybe. Then she said the sentence that would be replayed millions of times in this fictional world. Compassion that only works when people agree with you isn't compassion. Nobody at the table moved. Marina looked down, and for the first time that morning, she had no prepared answer. 3 days earlier, none of this had been supposed to happen. Adriana Voss had not even been booked for the same segment. Dayline was promoting a special week devoted to women rebuilding their lives after public failure, divorce, career upheaval, and personal loss. Marina Vale was scheduled for Tuesday, Adriana for Friday. Then Friday's guest canceled because of illness. A producer suggested moving Adriana forward. The executive producer hesitated. Same table as Marina? Why not? The executive producer looked through the glass control room window. Because Marina's team sent 14 pages of discussion parameters. The junior producer laughed, then realized nobody else was laughing. 14 pages. No questions about her estranged relatives. No discussion of former employees. No mention of a canceled lifestyle series. No questions about book sales. No direct comparison to other royal figures. No clips from previous interviews without pre-approval. No discussion of unnamed sources. No questions about whether public criticism had affected her marriage. No references to what her team called hostile online narratives. And most importantly, no surprise guests. Adriana Voss was technically not a surprise guest. She was simply another guest. But the executive producer had spent enough years in television to understand that technical distinctions rarely survived contact with live conversation. Adriana had a reputation, not for confrontation. Quite the opposite. She spoke softly. She disliked celebrity feuds. She almost never responded publicly to criticism. She had spent 20 years visiting refugee camps, hospitals, disaster zones, and rebuilding projects without turning every visit into a documentary about herself. She knew presidents, doctors, aid workers, soldiers, mothers who had buried children, children who had crossed borders alone. And whenever interviewers asked what those experiences had taught her, Adriana gave roughly the same answer. Pain does not make someone morally superior. That sentence had always interested the Dayline producer. He had no idea it was about to become the entire interview. On Tuesday morning, Marina Vale arrived at the studio at 8:14. Her security team arrived first, then her stylist, then 2 communications advisors, then a producer from her personal media company, then Marina. Cream suit, gold earrings, perfect hair, perfect smile. The staff greeted her warmly. She greeted them warmly back. But everyone noticed the same small thing. Marina never asked anyone's name twice. If she remembered it immediately, she used it constantly. If she forgot it, she stopped addressing the person directly. At 8:32, a production assistant named Leah brought Marina a cup of tea. Marina tasted it. Her expression changed. "This has honey." Leah froze. "I'm sorry. I was told honey and lemon. No honey. I can replace it." Marina handed the cup back. "Please," her tone was polite. Perfectly polite. Leah walked away quickly. Adriana had been standing 15 feet away talking to a lighting technician. She watched Leah disappear through the studio doors. Marina noticed. "Something wrong?" Adriana looked at her. "No." Marina smiled. "You looked concerned." "I was thinking." "About?" Adriana glanced toward the door. "Whether she'll remember the mistake longer than you do." Marina's smile faded slightly, then returned. "I wasn't rude to her. I didn't say you were." Adriana smiled and returned to her conversation. Marina watched her for another second. That was their first exchange. Nothing about it suggested what would happen later. At 9:03, the women were introduced. Marina hugged Adriana lightly. "I've admired your humanitarian work for years. Thank you. You've done extraordinary things. Lots of people do extraordinary things." Marina smiled. "You're very modest." "No." Adriana adjusted the microphone wire near her jacket. "I've just spent enough time around extraordinary people to know I'm usually not the most impressive person in the room." Marina laughed. But Adriana had not made a joke. At 9:17, the cameras went live. The host welcomed Marina first. The audience applauded. Marina spoke about her new initiative, Haven Table, which she described as a global project dedicated to creating spaces of healing and authentic community for women who have been silenced. The host smiled. "That's a beautiful mission." "Thank you. What does healing mean to you now?" Marina leaned slightly forward. "I think healing begins when we stop allowing other people to define our pain." Applause. Marina continued. "For so long, women are told to make themselves smaller, quieter, easier, and then when they finally speak, people criticize the way they speak." Adriana listened. "So part of healing is refusing that?" "Absolutely." The host turned toward Adriana. "You've worked with women in some extraordinarily difficult circumstances. Does that resonate with you?" Adriana considered the question. "Part of it." Marina looked toward her. The host smiled. "Which part?" "The part about people owning their experiences." Adriana paused. "I think that matters." "And the part that doesn't?" Marina smiled politely. Adriana looked toward the host. "I think sometimes we confuse owning our experience with owning everybody else's interpretation of it." The host leaned forward. "Explain that." Adriana rested her hands on the table. "If I tell you something hurt me, you don't get to tell me it didn't." Marina nodded. "Exactly, but I also don't get to tell you what you must think about me because I was hurt." Marina's smile changed. Very slightly. Adriana continued. "Those are different things." The host looked between them. Marina responded. "I agree in theory." Adriana nodded. "In theory is usually where agreement lives." A few audience members laughed. Marina did not. The host moved on. For several minutes, the conversation softened. They discussed motherhood, career changes, privacy, the difficulty of raising children around cameras. Adriana spoke carefully. Marina spoke fluently. Then the host asked about criticism. "Marina, you've dealt with an extraordinary amount of public judgment. Yes, how do you separate legitimate criticism from cruelty?" Marina exhaled. "That's difficult because criticism is often presented as legitimate when it's actually rooted in something much darker, such as misogyny, class resentment, racism, anger toward women who establish boundaries." Adriana looked down. Marina noticed. "Would you disagree?" Adriana looked up. "With which part? That women are punished for having boundaries?" "No. That women of color face a different level of scrutiny." "No. That public criticism can be weaponized." "Of course." Marina smiled. "Then I'm not sure where the disagreement is." Adriana looked at her. You didn't ask whether some criticism is unfair. You asked how to distinguish criticism from cruelty. Yes, and you only described cruelty. Marina paused. The host looked toward Adriana. Adriana continued. So I still don't know how you distinguish them. Marina's eyes narrowed slightly. I think intention matters. How do you know someone's intention? Patterns. Okay, Adriana leaned forward slightly. What pattern tells you criticism is legitimate? Marina paused. Well, she smiled. I think we're getting very philosophical. Adriana smiled back. It's your philosophy. The audience laughed softly. Marina looked toward them. The host intervened. Let me make it personal. Marina, has there been criticism where you later thought they were right? Marina's face remained composed. I'm very self-reflective. Adriana glanced at her. Marina continued. I constantly examine how I show up in the world. That's not quite the question, the host said. Marina smiled. No, but I think it answers it. Adriana said nothing. The host tried again. Can you think of one public criticism where you eventually agreed? Marina tilted her head. The difficulty is that so much criticism around me has been intentionally distorted. Adriana's fingers stopped moving. The host noticed. What are you thinking? Adriana shook her head. Nothing useful yet. The audience laughed. Marina did not. A commercial break came at 9:31. The moment the cameras stopped, Marina's communications advisor stepped toward the table. Can we stay away from the legitimacy of criticism framing? The host looked surprised. That was on the approved topic list. Broad criticism, yes, not asking Marina to validate specific narratives. We didn't mention a specific narrative. The advisor lowered her voice. It's where the conversation is heading. Adriana stood to stretch her legs. The advisor looked toward her. Adriana, obviously this isn't directed at you. Adriana smiled. I assumed it wasn't. Marina remained seated. We're just trying to keep the conversation constructive. Adriana looked at her. What would make it unconstructive? Marina answered quickly, turning lived experience into debate. Adriana nodded. Then don't. Marina frowned. Adriana walked toward the edge of the stage. The host followed. What does that mean? Adriana lowered her voice. If she says she was hurt, don't debate whether she was hurt. The host nodded. But if she says everyone who criticized her did it because they hated what she represented, Adriana glanced back at Marina. That isn't lived experience anymore. What is it? A claim about other people. The stage manager called 30 seconds. Adriana returned to her seat. The cameras came back. The host began with a lighter subject. Marina's new cooking series. A joke about Adriana's inability to cook. Adriana told a story about once burning rice in front of an ambassador. The audience laughed. For nearly 6 minutes, the tension disappeared. Then Marina brought it back herself. She was describing the freedom she had found after stepping away from an institution that had expected her to remain silent. I realized that silence protects systems, Marina said. Adriana looked at her. Marina continued. And sometimes speaking is the only way to reclaim yourself. Adriana nodded. I agree. Marina smiled. Then Adriana added, but speaking can also become a way of controlling the room. Marina's smile vanished. What do you mean? Adriana looked surprised. You want me to answer? Of course. The host looked between them. Adriana spoke carefully. If I share something painful, it can create 2 different responsibilities. Marina waited. You have a responsibility not to dismiss my pain. Yes. And I have a responsibility not to use my pain to make every disagreement with me immoral. Marina's face hardened. I don't think anyone is doing that. Adriana nodded. Good. Marina stared at her. The host attempted to move on. But Marina did not. Because I think there's sometimes discomfort when women finally name what happened to them. Adriana nodded. There can be. And people call that controlling the narrative. They can. When really it's just telling the truth. Sometimes, Marina's eyes narrowed. Sometimes, Adriana took a slow breath. Truth and interpretation aren't always the same thing. Marina leaned back. That sounds very convenient. For whom? For people who want to minimize harm. Adriana went quiet. The host sensed the shift. Marina continued. I think women have spent generations being told their perception is subjective whenever it makes powerful people uncomfortable. Adriana nodded. That's true. So I'm surprised you'd use that language. What language? Interpretation. Adriana looked at her for several seconds. Then said, Do you want me to agree with you or answer you? The audience reacted. Marina blinked. I want an honest discussion. So do I. Then have one. Adriana's expression changed. Very slightly. All right. The room became quieter. Adriana leaned forward. I have spent 25 years meeting people after the worst day of their lives. Marina watched her. Women whose villages were burned. Children who lost parents. Families driven across borders. People who survived things neither of us could understand from this table. Nobody moved. And something you learn very quickly is that suffering doesn't automatically make people wise. Marina's eyes hardened. Adriana continued. It can make people compassionate. Sometimes, it can also make them angry. Controlling, suspicious, cruel. The host looked at Marina. Adriana's voice remained soft. Pain explains behavior. She paused. It doesn't automatically justify it. Marina looked stunned. Are you saying I'm cruel? No, because that's what you just implied. I didn't. You listed cruelty while discussing me. I was discussing suffering. We were discussing my experience. No, Adriana shook her head. You were discussing what suffering entitles someone to. Marina leaned forward. That is an extraordinary distortion. Adriana stayed calm, then correct it. I shouldn't have to. And there it was. Adriana's eyes changed. The same way they had changed when Leah carried the wrong tea away. Not anger. Recognition. The host tried to soften the conversation. I think maybe both of you are actually closer than it seems. Marina interrupted. No, because this is important. She looked directly at Adriana. You have spent years being celebrated for humanitarian work, but with respect, you have never experienced the particular kind of institutional campaign that I experienced. Adriana said nothing. Marina continued. So it's very easy to sit here and speak philosophically about pain when you haven't lived this kind of targeted dehumanization. A low sound moved through the audience. Adriana looked down at her hands. Then back up. You're right. Marina paused. The audience paused with her. Adriana continued. I haven't lived your life. Marina nodded. Exactly, and you haven't lived mine. Marina stopped. Adriana's voice became quieter. So maybe we shouldn't rank them. The host remained absolutely still. Marina looked toward the audience. I wasn't ranking anything. You just explained why your experience gives you insight that mine doesn't. That's different. How? Because I'm talking about context. Adriana nodded slowly. Context, yes, Adriana looked toward the host, then back toward Marina. Can I tell you what worries me? Marina crossed her arms. Please. Adriana took a breath. I believe you when you say you were hurt. Marina said nothing. I believe people treated you unfairly. Another pause. I believe some criticism of you was ugly. Marina's expression softened slightly. And I think you've become so accustomed to defending yourself against unfair criticism, Adriana paused, that you may no longer recognize fair criticism when it arrives. Marina's face changed. The host whispered, Wow. Marina stared across the table. That's deeply patronizing. It might be wrong. It is wrong. Okay, Adriana nodded. But you asked. Marina's voice sharpened. I asked for a discussion. I didn't ask to be psychologically assessed by somebody who doesn't know me. Adriana remained calm. I'm not assessing you. You absolutely are. I'm describing what happened at this table. Marina started speaking faster. No, what's happening is the same thing that always happens. A woman establishes her truth, and suddenly someone decides she needs to be corrected. Humbled. Made smaller because confidence makes people uncomfortable. Marina kept going. And I refuse to apologize for having survived things people know absolutely nothing about, and if that makes certain people uncomfortable? Marina, still she continued. Then maybe the discomfort says more about them than it does about. Stop, silence, Marina froze. Adriana did not raise her voice. She did not point. She did not lean forward dramatically. She simply looked at Marina. Please stop. The host's mouth opened, then closed. Marina stared. Adriana said, You're doing it right now. Doing what? Turning disagreement into evidence of somebody else's moral failure. Marina shook her head. That's not what I said. You said if people are uncomfortable, the discomfort says something about them. Sometimes it does. Yes, Adriana nodded. And sometimes they're uncomfortable because you're wrong. The audience went completely silent. Marina blinked. Adriana continued. That possibility has to exist. Marina looked furious now. You clearly came here with a judgment about me. No, you did. I came here to talk about rebuilding lives. Then why are we talking about me being wrong? Adriana's expression softened. Because you keep describing healing as something everyone else has to do around you. Marina said nothing. Adriana continued. The press has to change. The institution has to change. Your relatives have to understand. Critics have to reflect. Viewers have to examine their bias. She paused. Maybe all of that is true. Marina stared at her. But where are you in the equation? The question landed differently than everything before it. Marina looked down. Adriana waited. No sarcasm, no smile, no performance. Where do you change? Marina swallowed. I've changed enormously. How? I've protected my peace, that's a boundary. Yes, I asked what you changed about yourself. Marina stared. I don't think I owe you an inventory of personal growth. You don't. Then why ask? Because you keep describing healing. Marina said nothing. Adriana leaned back. Maybe I'm wrong. Another pause. Tell me. Marina's voice cooled. I think your definition of healing is rooted in an older model where women are expected to absorb mistreatment and then prove their goodness through forgiveness. Adriana's eyebrows rose. That isn't what I said. It's where your argument leads. No, you're saying victims need to examine themselves. No, you are. Adriana shook her head. I'm saying everyone needs to examine themselves. Marina started to answer. Adriana stopped her gently. And that includes victims. Marina's face hardened. That is incredibly dangerous language. The host inhaled sharply. Adriana stared at Marina. For perhaps 5 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Adriana asked, why? Because it shifts responsibility. For what happened to them? Yes, no. Adriana's voice was firmer now. You're changing what I said. I'm telling you how it lands. And I'm telling you what I meant. Marina leaned back. Well, intention isn't everything. Adriana almost smiled. No, she nodded. It isn't. And something about the sentence made Marina realize she had walked into her own argument. For a moment, her expression changed. Recognition, a way out. She could have laughed. She could have said, fair point. She could have admitted that the conversation had become more defensive than she intended. Instead, she said, I just think someone with your platform should be more careful. Adriana looked at her. With what? Language that can invalidate people who have experienced trauma. Adriana nodded. And someone with your platform? Marina paused. What about it? Should you be careful too? Of course. How? Marina stared. The audience waited. Adriana repeated, "How are you careful with the people you describe?" Marina's expression closed. "I don't attack people." Adriana said nothing. "I describe systems." Adriana nodded. "What happens when an individual disagrees with your description of the system?" Marina's voice sharpened. "This is becoming circular. Only because you won't answer." Marina looked toward the host. "This is exactly the kind of hostile framing I was told we weren't doing today." The host sat straighter. Before she could intervene, Adriana said, "I'm not hostile." Marina looked back at her. "I'm asking you something very simple." Marina waited. Adriana placed both hands flat on the table. "If everyone who disagrees with you is cruel, silence. Who is allowed to tell you when you're wrong?" Marina froze. That was the question. The room went silent. Not television silent. Real silent. The kind where people become conscious of breathing. Marina looked toward the host, then toward the audience, then back to Adriana. Her mouth opened. "Nothing." Adriana waited. Marina finally said, "Well, I think that framing is a little unfair." Adriana nodded. "Maybe." No triumph. No gloating. "Then you asked what I thought." Marina swallowed. "I did. I'm answering." The host looked down at her notes even though everyone knew there was nothing useful written there. Marina said, "I have people in my life who challenge me. Good. People who know me. Good. So the idea that I surround myself with agreement is simply false." Adriana nodded. "I hope so." Marina looked frustrated. "Then what exactly are you accusing me of?" "Nothing." "You clearly are." "No." Adriana leaned back. "I'm telling you what I've seen today." Marina stared at her. "You asked the host not to ask certain questions. That's normal media practice. Maybe. You described criticism almost entirely as cruelty. Because much of it is. Maybe. You told me my experience means I can't understand yours. That isn't what I said." And when I disagreed, Adriana paused. "You said my language was dangerous." Marina's face flushed. Adriana remained soft. "Maybe every one of those things has a good explanation." Silence. "But if every person who challenges you eventually becomes part of the problem..." She shook her head. "You'll never know when the problem is you." The audience reacted audibly. Marina's eyes glistened. She immediately looked away. The host stepped in. "I think we should take a breath." Marina raised a hand. "No." She looked at Adriana. "I want to answer that." Adriana nodded. Marina took several seconds. Then she said, "I think people underestimate what it costs to survive constant judgment." Adriana listened. "You become protective. Yes, you become suspicious." Adriana nodded. "Yes, you stop knowing who is safe." "Yes," Marina's voice trembled slightly. "And sometimes you assume criticism is an attack before you actually know what it is." Nobody moved. Adriana's face softened completely. "Yes." Marina looked down. There it was. The response nobody expected. Not a comeback. Not a denial. An admission. Marina swallowed. "I probably do that." The audience stayed silent. Adriana did not smile. She simply said, "I think most people do after they've been hurt enough." Marina looked at her. "And how do you stop?" Adriana's answer came immediately. "You let one person disagree with you without making them your enemy." Marina stared. Adriana reached for her coffee cup. Then added, "Start with one." The audience applauded. Not explosively. Warmly, Marina's eyes filled. She laughed once through the emotion. That was annoyingly good. Adriana smiled. "I've had years to practice being annoying." The audience laughed. The tension broke. The host placed one hand over her chest. I genuinely had no idea where that was going. Adriana looked toward Marina. Neither did I. Marina wiped beneath one eye. Then she said something that changed the entire tone of the interview. "I think maybe I've spent so long trying to prove that I wasn't what people said," she paused, "that I forgot I don't have to prove they're terrible either." Adriana nodded. That sounds exhausting. It is. For the first time all morning, Marina laughed without looking toward the cameras. After the show, the clips spread everywhere. But the most shared moment was not Adriana stopping Marina. It was not the question. It was not even the line about compassion. It was Marina's answer. I probably do that. 4 words. That was all. 4 words accomplished what years of interviews had failed to do. They made Marina look less polished, less certain, less protected, and strangely, more human. The production assistant named Leah watched the clip on her phone during lunch. The same Leah who had brought the wrong tea that morning. At 2:07 that afternoon, Marina found her near the makeup rooms. Leah? Leah turned. Surprised, Marina remembered. Yes? Marina looked uncomfortable. The tea thing this morning. Leah immediately shook her head. It was fine. No. Marina paused. I made it feel less fine than it was. Leah stared. Marina smiled awkwardly. I'm practicing with one. Leah laughed. Marina laughed too. It was a tiny moment. Nobody filmed it. Nobody posted it. Nobody turned it into content. Which may have been why it mattered. Because healing did not happen when Marina won the argument. It happened when she finally allowed the possibility that she didn't have to. And Adriana Voss had not stunned her by humiliating her. She had done something much harder. She had disagreed with her without abandoning her. That was the difference. And sometimes one honest response really does change everything.